Audrey Barucchi is the co-founder and CEO of People for Nature, a non-profit protecting Australia's biodiversity through education, citizen action, and science. She's one of the people I think of first when the conversation turns to climate action and what genuine hope actually looks like in practice. Her path to this work wasn't straight. It took her from France to South America to China and Hong Kong, and eventually to Australia, where she's been rooted since 2008. Over 10 years working in the corporate world, she slowly uncovered the truth about how systemic greenwashing actually operates. And when she did, she walked away and built People for Nature on a completely different premise, that every person is the ocean, not a drop in the ocean, that every one of us is a vector for positive change. This conversation left me with a lot to sit with. I hope it does the same for you. Hello, Audrey. Welcome to Reconnect. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Hello, and thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm Audrey. My last name is Barucchi, which happens to be from the southeast of France or Italy and Corsica. There's already quite a lot of cultural heritage, a mix of cultural heritage there. I was born in France. I had a dad who was in the French Air Force, so I traveled from pretty much the day I was born. I lived in many different places, and including in Africa, which was quite life-changing. And then I continued on that journey of traveling and discovering the world up to the point that I landed in Australia now 17 years ago. And I've been here ever since. I married an Australian man. I had 2 children. I spent a great chunk of my career in corporate communications for environmental technologies, clean technologies, carbon capture technologies. So sort of slowly weaving the big tapestry of, the multifaceted crisis that we're going through. And now a couple of years ago, I co-founded an environmental charity called People for Nature. And I spend most of my days trying to lead that charity with intention and trying to leave a legacy of optimism and hope for not just my children, but everyone around me.
Wonderful. People for Nature. So there is definitely a connection with nature throughout your life, throughout your career. Can you tell us about this connection to nature from maybe an early age, maybe from, experiences in your past, all of that?
Yes. I often reflect on that. Well, I often reflect on that because, I should have said that in my intro, I live on 40 acres of bushland in the middle of the forest of Australia. So it's not, an average kind of journey to end up where I am. And I often, look outside and walk on the grass and, listen to the birds and think, why am I here? Why did I decide to live in the forest? And I think, being a kid of a military family, we had to move a lot. We didn't really have roots, using nature term. And so for my dad, it was really important that we would have somewhere we would call home. And so, through the first 20 years of my life, that home place was in the Southern Alps, in the mountains, in a very, very tiny little village that I think has about 200, all year round residents. So very tiny, very old as well. There's a very, very old church that's, 1,000 years old. But the important part is the fact that it was in the mountains. So it's in the forest and it's connected to the trees. And I used to go and walk the mountains, look for, wild mushrooms and different types of herbs. And my granddad used to tell me stories about the birds, the clouds. And I think that's where my very strong connection to nature comes from. I think I spent a lot of time as a child, there was no screen, no internet. My parents weren't big, fans of TVs and things like that. So we had to just stay outside with my 2 brothers and find games. And often our games were involved insects, mud, trees, climbing trees, sometimes just going into the forest or into the mountains, which, back then, especially in that place, we were allowed to just go anywhere. And we would go and wander for hours and hours and come back. So I think that's probably where, and today, I'm very grateful for how I grew up. But I think that part, I don't think my dad really realized what would stay. I think he was after a grounding, a home, a place I would call home, which, I now live 17,000 kilometers away from that. And I think that makes him a little bit upset and sad at times. But I think what it left me, or what it gave me, is this just massive attachment to nature, to the natural world, and just, being able to, I don't know, sometimes if I feel, I would say not sometimes, every single day I have to go outside and touch trees and touch the grass and listen to the birds. Like, I can't go without that, which is probably why I had to move away from the city.
Yeah. So you moved away from multiple different cities, if I understand correctly. You moved away from Hong Kong after living there for a little while. You moved away from Sydney after living there for a little while. Was there a particular tipping point, or like a gap that you're like, I can't take this anymore and I have to move away to nature and reconnect and ground myself a little bit more?
I think I left my family, if you like, and I kept doing what I was used to do, which was travel and move. When you grow up with an army family or military family, you move all the time. So staying in the same place for a year or 2 or 3 or 4 for me is foreign. It's not normal. And so it wasn't like I wasn't fleeing anywhere, or it was just normal to move from one place to the next. So I, through studying, I got a lot of different opportunities. I lived in China for quite some time in a few different cities. I moved to India for a year. Then I moved to Hong Kong for a year. And then I decided to come to Australia. I never had thought that I would stay in Australia. But what happened was I gave birth to my first child here. And that really grounded me. And, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, now I've got to be here for a while. And, how do I feel about this? And interestingly, now that I think about it, I actually went for a bushwalk to reflect on that. So I took a day off work and I went to do a big bushwalk. And I remember sort of sitting on a big rock and thinking, okay, what do I do now? Do I keep moving? What's ahead of me? Staying in Australia and grounding myself in Australia was a blessing in disguise. It's allowed me to project myself in the long term. It's allowed me, to buy, the property where I am, and build projects, including People for Nature, with a multi-decade vision rather than just being always in motion. And so, yeah, I think it's allowed me to unfold certain things from my life that I just needed to unfold. And it needed that grounding that I didn't have before.
That's fascinating, I think, from various points of views. Motherhood is, I think, one big part that we could discuss, but also just attachment and grounding. And I'm just curious to know now, from your point of view, do you see grounding and being set somewhere as a vector to being more connected to nature, or it doesn't necessarily need to be that way?
Yes, I do. I'm so grateful that I got to live on 5 different continents and I speak 4 different languages. I'm immensely grateful for that. But, it's just this whole globalized view of the world where we can just, travel the world, work in so many different places, is based on the fact that we have, a huge amount of free energy available. And I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think that's going to last. I don't think that your children, my children, will be able to have that type of lifestyle. And so I think with the understanding that I have today, I would probably have thought, well, no, let me travel the world in different ways. Travel the world. And I read a beautiful book from Jean Giono, the French author, as I was traveling and, really traveling the world. And I remember the scene in his book that was describing the fact that you could actually sit in your backyard or in a park and look at just a little patch of grass under you and travel the world exactly the same way in a deep, meaningful way. You can just look at what's happening in the soil and the grass, and really start to travel the world, And it stayed with me. It was a very long time ago. It stayed with me because it sort of challenged my view of the world, where I had to, explore everything and discover everything. And, I was a an insect enthusiast. I loved insects. So yes, I could actually connect with that idea that you could just look at a little patch of grass, the soil, the microbes, the insects, maybe a bird coming in, the wind, and all of that is just as much exploration as traveling the whole globe. It's like a micro level traveling. So yeah, I think I would have had a different life if I had understood the climate crisis, the environmental crisis, the social crisis in the way that I do now. But you could argue maybe my understanding today is made of all those travels and all those encounters and all those experiences. So, I can't, I can't really know, who I would be without all of that today.
That would be hard to judge, obviously, because you're made of all of your different experiences, the different cultures you've lived in. And something I wanted to go back to, if you don't mind, talking about motherhood, because I think, anyone that knows Audrey, I've known you for the past, I think, 4 to 5 years. And anyone that knows you knows that you are a ball of energy and just hope in what's possible. You, within just a year, built an incredible charity, People for Nature, we'll talk about a little bit later. But looking at you, you can't say that motherhood is, the contrary of building a huge career for yourself. I'm interested in knowing how you see motherhood in that way, and especially grounded in the very, deep work that you do for nature and community around you.
I always wanted to have a lot of children, but I wanted to have 4 children. So for me, I couldn't have imagined myself and my life without children. Children, a bit like, what I was saying to you, having to stay in Australia sort of projected me into the long term. Motherhood for me and having children has projected me into many generations. So it's allowed me to see the world not in my own little bubble, kind of, 80, 100, 115 years that I'm going to be here for, but in a multi-generation kind of way. And in that way, it's actually transformed me, transformed how I see me, my body, my legacy, even just nature stewardship. Like I can't anymore just go, oh, well, in 60 years, I won't be here. So why does it matter? No, my children will be here. My grandchildren will be here. So yeah, I don't know. It's just so transformative. So that's the deep sense of motherhood for me. And then there's the practical everyday. You become a mom and you think, oh, I'm quite patient and I'm this ball of energy and I can do anything. And then you have children. And then you have children and they show you that you're absolutely not the wonderful person that you are. And it's good. It's good to have that, reality check, that, humble moment, in your life of like, oh, you're ticking all this, you're traveling the world, you have a very successful career, and then you have children. And your children just go, no, you're insignificant. They love you to death. But at the same time, they remind you that, you're not as wonderful and as patient and as humble and as all of these things, and you can see that, or at least that's been for me as an invitation to be a little bit better every day. I tell my children, look, I don't have a book on how to be the perfect mom or the perfect parent. So I'm winging it. And I tell them, I just wing it every day. But one thing for sure is I wake up every morning trying to be the best that I can be with all the learning that I have from the days before and the years before. And then I go to bed realizing it wasn't as good as I would have liked it to be. But you know what? Tomorrow I'll try again and I'll try even better. And I don't know, I think for me, it's just been, I've said to a lot of friends that are thinking about having children, they change you within, they're just inside you in ways that nothing in life can. It's just, it's transformative completely.
Incredible. I can see that in my generation right now, people that don't have children yet, it's a big question mark. Like, do I want to embark on this journey? And it's, I think, a deep question that obviously demands like a lot of reflection, a lot of, I guess, inspiration from other people like you. But I don't see it either from the people that I've talked to as a antinomic of a career. I see it almost as a vector sometimes, in the stories at least that I've heard. And I can hear it from you too, that it's first grounded you, but then also enabled you in your day-to-day to just increase your involvement in nature, in patience, in empathy, and all of this?
There is a curse in this whole digitalization of the world and, transhumanism and AI, and we continue going on that, is the perfectionism. Just the idea that everything has to be perfect and planned and in an Excel spreadsheet. When you have kids, you have to put all of that in the bin. Take that paper, put it all in the bin, and learn how to wing it. Learn that, life unfolds in very unexpected ways, and it's good that it's like that. It's actually really healthy. So I think, yeah, I can see how many young people and, my children will come to that, how everything needs to be planned and perfect. Like my child, he gets, he's a teenager now, and he worries if he doesn't have his phone because he doesn't know where to go. And I'm like, it's okay. Just sit on the bench here and ask people or wait, something will happen eventually. And the children journey just brings you back to that, brings you back to, it's okay. There's no plan. There's no Excel spreadsheet. Nothing's perfect. But you know what? It will be fine. We've been doing it for a long, long, long time. And, and it's not going to stop here in 2026. It's just going to continue forever and after. You've got to trust the process. So my journey, wow. So I think the journey starts when I started to leave my parents. I left my parents very young. I decided to go to the US when I was 16 for a year. Yes, there was no internet back then. That says how old I am. And I did that for a year, which means, I completely stepped out of my comfort zone in a world where, there was no internet, no connection to friends, no connection to my language, etc. But I think that's an important milestone because that's where I really left the nest and realized that I could do anything, that I could go anywhere, that the foreign, the outside of the comfort zone wasn't scary at all. And also that no matter where you go on earth, you find brothers and sisters, we're all the same. And yes, we have very different cultures, different languages, etc. But there are some intrinsic human values that we all share. And so I did that for a year. Then I came back. And then for, the next few years, I couldn't stay in France. Every time I had 3 or 4 months, I had to go somewhere. So I went and traveled South America quite a bit, Peru, Guatemala, and then Spain as well. And then I got a chance so I was studying at university and I met someone that had a scholarship to go and study in China. It was absolutely not my curriculum, or I wasn't studying Chinese at all. I had never heard about Chinese language before, but I happened to get hold of that scholarship paper because he didn't want to go. And before I knew it, I was on my way to Jinan, the capital city of Shandong. So I went there for a year. Probably one of the hardest things I've ever done because, I got there thinking, okay, people will speak a bit of English, it'll be fine. And then, back then, no one spoke any words of English in Jinan. So I found myself going, okay, well, what do I do now? And not being able to speak to anyone means isolation. And for me, again, another milestone, the realization that communication with other human beings is absolutely critical to our survival. Not just as, how do I go and buy food at the supermarket, but as, like in our mental and emotional and so I studied a lot. I basically locked myself in a room and studied for months upon months, every single day, very hard, up to the point that I could actually start speaking Mandarin Chinese and communicating with others and very much enjoyed that time. Loved my time in China, absolutely loved the Chinese culture. Yeah, it was just such a wonderful experience. And that brought me back to China a few times. So I went back to live in Shanghai after this. Well, in Beijing first and then Shanghai. And then after that, I got an opportunity to go and study in India. So, of course, I said yes. When I was 14, I read The City of Joy, which is the story of Mother Teresa, book that made me cry quite a few times at that age. And yeah, it took me a while to read it because, from time to time, I had to put it on my bedside table and I was in tears and I had to breathe and then bring it back. And so, of course, when I saw Kolkata as one of the cities I could actually go to, that's the box I ticked, which I got very easily because no one wanted to go to Kolkata. Everyone wanted to go to Delhi or Mumbai. So it was quite nice. And again, another milestone. Absolutely loved my time there. Yeah, India was so transformative as well. more in the social or human aspect of things, seeing such a deep culture, but also, I don't know, India, there's all, like it's biodiversity day in, day out. There's all the different, colors and smells, but also you have very rich people and very, very poor people. Like, it's just everything is so intense. And I think there's a quote that says, you either love it or you hate it. And it feels like that every single day. You kind of love it, but at the same time you hate it. And it's kind of all of that. Now, after India, I went to Hong Kong for a year. I worked in the corporate sector there. I liked my time in no, actually, I should say I hated Hong Kong. I hated my time in Hong Kong. I hated my job in Hong Kong. I hated everything I did in Hong Kong. But it was an important milestone because sometimes it's nice to know what you don't want to kind of go back to what you want. And that is exactly what brought me to Australia. It was just like, I can't have that. I can't have this, big, busy corporate life, money, playing poker on Friday night and then going out and just, concrete everywhere. It's just like, this is not me. I'm losing myself here. So I went diving for a week, underwater, silence. And I thought, okay, I need to get out of here. And I packed everything, resigned, and came to Australia. And actually arrived in Brisbane. I was going to be here for a year. I was going to reflect and I was going to meditate on what was, the next big decade of my life. And I fell in love with nature here. I fell in love with the jacaranda. I came here in October 2008. It was jacaranda season, these massive, beautiful purple flowers everywhere. And the possums, I remember seeing possums every night, sitting. And I just thought, my goodness, I just want to be here. It's so beautiful. Everywhere is so beautiful. And, it's like, when you travel, you want to see a lot of cultural things, But in Australia, it's like, I'm back to what I was, mentioning from Jean Giono's book. It's like I can just sit here and look at the sky and the birds. Like at the moment, I've got beautiful birds that I can see from my bedroom window. And I can just watch them every single morning. I get up and I just watch them. And it's the same tree and the same birds, but every day is different. So there you go.
What a journey. What a journey. Quite impressive. And it took you through so many different countries with so many different cultures. And I think arriving, especially in a country like Australia, where the culture is still historically new, even though we shouldn't say that, it feels in cities, at least like Sydney and Brisbane, like it's a conglomerate of so many different nationalities that culture can be sometimes lost as a whole, but then created in like local communities. And nature definitely surrounds us all in Australia. I think this is one of the many reasons why expats in general decide to go there, at least the ones that are not, immigrating for economical reason, which obviously can be the case a lot of the times. I want to go back to the different types of industries that you've worked in your 20s and your 30s. You've worked inside companies that, presented themselves as green, as having an actual solution to climate change, which is a bold claim, but still can entice anyone to join in the fight and do whatever you can to make that happen. We don't have to name any company names or anything, but can you tell us about this journey and uncovering the truth about the actual missions that you were helping throughout this time?
Yes. So when I first came to Australia, I got hired by a wonderful manager, and hopefully maybe he gets a chance to listen to this podcast and he might have a smile. I sent my CV from Hong Kong because I was like, oh, I'm coming to Australia, so looking for something. And he was looking for a unique profile. And with a little bit of what I've just said, I was kind of that. I was a bit unique, I spoke 4 languages. I was a little bit, everywhere. And, I had an interesting academic background as well. So he thought, okay, let's meet this person. So we met and I think we clicked. We, thought, oh yeah, we just want to, often you work with people that you want to work with, right? You hire people on skills, etc. But there's also a great element of, hey, I want to hang out with that person for a while. So I think that worked well. And I got hired. Now, this was a French civil engineering company. And my job was within a part of that company that was looking at specialized type of concrete for very, very specialized type applications, including defense, like blast resilient walls. So it was great. It was a, unique type of job for a unique type of person. So it was good. I had lots of fun. It was, a great team. And that was my step into engineering. And as I stepped out of this company, I got into another engineering company, an Australian one this time. And they had a bit of civil, but mostly geotechnical and environmental. So I kind of got a little bit closer to the environmental movement. And you'll see how, all of that evolves kind of despite myself, really, because I didn't, I just happened to look for jobs that kept me close to science because, before working in the corporate sector and having a master's in business administration, I really loved insects. So for me, I had to stay within science one way or the other. So that was quite great. Engineering, awesome. Communicating on, scientific topics and engineering topics, happy days. So I stayed there for a little while. And while I was working for this Australian company, I got hired by a startup and they needed someone that had a bit of experience in sort of, unique type of building products or concrete applications. And I was like, perfect. I often say to people, what I did for a living, while I was in the corporate sector was very niche and very unique. So there was not a lot of competition within what I did. So it was pretty easy for me to move from one, job to the next. So I got hired by the startups and I thought, wow, this is cool. I remember meeting the chief scientist and the MD of the time. And it was just these, white-haired men with some crazy ideas, really, how we were going to decarbonize, how to abate industry and come up with all these more sustainable products. And, and they just had personal stories that really appealed to me. So I thought, okay, why not? So I left a really good job in a very, very well-established organization to join this crazy startup. Now, this crazy startup was a company that had some pretty bold ideas, which I felt early on was, linked to some good ambitions, some genuine ambition of tackling the environmental crisis, the climate crisis. And so it started a pretty long journey because I stayed in there for pretty much 10 years. And in 10 years, you get to see a lot and you get to understand a lot. And because I'm quite a naturally curious person, I asked a lot of questions within that 10 years. And what I did discover was that, it's really hard, to say that, people do certain things intentionally, because I really do think that, people that even are at the leadership of that company don't quite understand why they do what they do. I think it's it's not intentional, we know that this is not working or this is not, but what I saw during the 10 years was the capitalization of the climate crisis. So how do you take an emotion, the fear of the climate crisis, and how do you convert that into capital, into money, into shares? I had no idea about how all of that worked. I had no idea. I did a master's in business administration. I did a major in financial analysis. Come on. Sometimes I go, wow, how did I do this? But maybe it is because my major was in financial analysis that I was very, very interested in the whole financialization of all of that. It was the engineering stuff that fascinated me. And I spent a lot of time with engineers asking questions. How does that work? Visiting plants. But there was also the financialization of it that really interested me and that, grabbed my attention. And, I kind of got out of it 10 years later thinking, wow, are we really tackling the climate crisis here? Or are we making some people richer? And, when I started ask myself that question, I pulled on that thread a little bit more. And that thread actually revealed a tapestry that I wasn't very proud of and that I didn't really like. So I think there was a little bit of denial for me to just go, no, surely that's not possible. Surely, these people really want to tackle climate change, right? Surely these technologies are real. And so, yeah, after some time, I think it took me almost 2 years to kind of go, yeah, I've got to get out of here. This is, I'm not here for the money. I'm here because I really care about the climate crisis. And so I went from, it was a good milestone again in my life to go from, the idea that those clever engineers and brilliant technologies would actually solve the climate crisis for us, to the understanding that no, nothing and no one's going to save it for us but ourselves. We actually have to transition. We don't have to come up with new solutions. We don't have to invest all the capital and the brain power that we have in fancy new stuff. We have to transition to known solutions. I mean, when I look back, I think it took me 8 years to understand. 8 years is a very long time. It's a lot of questions. It's a lot of, maybe some people, it would have been, 6 months. I don't know. I don't claim to be very clever. For me, it was an 8-year journey. And I don't regret it, because it really made me understand the climate crisis, not at, a scientific level, or it was just the whole tapestry, the science of climate change. Why is there climate change? What are the causes? What are the consequences? But there was also 8 years of, wow, like there's a lot more than the physical science of climate change, because otherwise we have a problem, we will solve it, right? There's a reason why we're not solving it, or why it's not moving. And, being able for 10 years to actually observe what is happening in this little microcosmos that was this company was great. It was very, life-changing as well.
And as you said, you were surrounded by incredible engineers that they were working towards, a technology that they also thought was going to solve climate change. I'm just thinking of people that are in a similar situation at work, or they joined an organization, they are surrounded by amazing people, and they feel like the needle maybe is not moving, or that their efforts are not perhaps taken into consideration by their higher ups. Is there a framework or something that you've reflected on for people in this situation that want to unravel the truth or become more curious?
Yeah, I think ask questions, not, there's a great, I don't know, but we're in an era of information overload. So everyone's just bombarding us with lots of information. And so it's very hard to catch up on the reality. But also, everyone seems so clever and full of information that sometimes, and I remember in my time in that company, I used to take my notebook and take a pen, and I used to sit with something and just go, can you draw it for me? Can you explain to me this? Everyone should do that. Everyone should just go, if I don't get it, then ask again. And not feel bad that, oh my goodness, they must think I'm just a dumbass. But it's okay. It's okay. Like, you need to understand what you do, and you need to understand why you do it. And until you do understand that, continue asking questions. And the other thing is, yeah, we're all stuck in a capitalistic society. So, we all have bills to pay. And, I think a lot of people are doing jobs that they don't really like, and they just don't have a choice. If that's the case, then, yeah, I don't know, maybe reflect on, how, if you realize that the why that you do what you do is not so great, then reflect on how you can stay away from that, or at least do something that might be a little bit less bad. But it's very difficult. I even when I did resign, I think, well, I resigned because I could, but not everyone. If I was 25, maybe I would have gone, what do I do? And I feel for people, like I said, for me, it took me a long time, but I feel for people who get it very early on, because they're very clever and they're very systemic in their way of thinking, and just, go, what do I do? But I think if we want to transition in a world that's going to have less energy, less wealth, being able to, start really early in your journey of living more with less, I think is a good process for young people to just go, hey, this whole kind of very abundant lifestyle that, I've been used to through my parents, my grandparents, that's not there anymore. So how do I adapt? How do I live less? I live less. I live more. I have more connection with others, etc. With less. Or you on the traveling part, you could say, well, if I travel less, it's going to cost me less money. How do I fill in that gap of joy with other things that are just going to be as meaningful for me, right? So yeah, I think it's two things that need to happen: is asking ourselves the question of, how do we transition ourselves and not contribute to the very system that we think is breaking in front of our eyes, while starting to adapt. And adapting doesn't mean that we're going to be unhappy. It's the other way around. Working less, being less unchained to the, crazy consumerist capitalist world is actually going to be better for us. So it's all good news, really. It's a massive process, right? It's like you've been told all these narratives for so long, and then you've got to go, oh, wow, okay, so all of this is just BS, right? Like I've got to restart my narrative from scratch, and surround yourself with people that are going through the same thing. There's a lot of people that are transitioning. There's not enough, we were talking about this before we started the podcast. There's not enough positive stories, out there. But there's lots of people that are connecting the dots. They're connecting the dots very quickly. I was in a workshop the other day and someone said, oh, no, I've lost hope in the new generation. No, I haven't. I think the generation is amazing. I think they've connected the dots way before I did. They're clever, they I think I have a lot of hope. And I look around me, people of my age, people that are older than me, that, are my mentors or teachers. And I think there's people that have been doing incredible things since the 80s, They understood, so early on, and they've been rebuilding the way they live, the way they work, the way they connect with others, the way they connect with food systems. And I'm just like, yeah, that's it. You're my heroes. You're the people that I want to hear more from, so that I can be like you when I'm older,
Yeah, I so relate to this. And I was going to ask you the question about like how, after having an experience like that for 10 years working with a startup and uncovering a truth that you didn't think was the case when joining, how did you move towards like hope and not just like bathe in cynicism and thinking, yeah, this problem is so systemic that there is no way that us as little people can actually do something about it?
I had a lot of cynicism, Val. If you had met me there, I had a lot of cynicism. And I think that was also an observation that led me to think I need to leave, because, like my soul was just starting to rot, really. So, and, cynicism is good. It was a way for me to defend myself from certain things, from certain realization. But anyway, I had quite a bit of cynicism. I left, and I still remember the day I left. It was difficult. It's difficult to leave a journey after 10 years with the realization I had, like with, oh my God, I've given myself my life, 10 years into this, and now what? I then decided to leave the corporate world for good. I was like, money and eternal growth, the capitalist system does not resonate well with nature stewardship and planetary limits and biophysical limits of our planet. So I thought, okay, no more revenue growth, KPIs and whatever. It just doesn't work. I'll have to sacrifice a lot of income, but that's okay. Again, I'm not saying, wow, Audrey, well done. You're like, I could do it. I was at an age where I was like, if people like me who are, I have a bit of, shelter, etc., don't do it, I mean, who's going to do it, right? So we have to. It's almost, I saw it as a duty or, as a must to do. So I left. I joined an existing environmental charity. It didn't take me 10 years. I loved my time there. I loved my time in this charity, but I struggled with two things. The first thing was where the money was coming from. And I was just like, no, I can't give another 10 years to these people. I just can't. Fossil fuel companies have got to go. Like they're criminals, right? And yes, this is made with fossil fuel. This is made with fossil fuel. Yeah, of course. But I still can sit here and say, yeah, it has to go. And we need to rethink how we do these things, build these things, live, eat. We have to transition away from burning fossil fuels and destroying our planets, destroying our habitat, destroying all living species with whom, we're sharing this habitat with. So for me, it was very clear. So I was like, okay, I can't work for the fossil fuel company, so I've got to jump off that boat as well. So I did. But in the meantime, what actually happened was I met, my co-founder, who I think shared the same enthusiasm and sense of active hope. She's a researcher, looking at fish, and with her biology background, really, deep understanding of the environmental crisis, really deep understanding, which is like, okay, she understands what I'm saying and what I'm feeling. But I think philosophically speaking, just like me, she had picked to kind of go, all right, so what do we do? What do you do? It's like, okay, now you get it. It's all going to shit, but what do you do? And like you said in your question, you have two types of philosophy. You have the people who go, well, I'm just a drop in the ocean. And then you have the other type of people that go, no, I'm the entire ocean in one drop. I'm the change. And you know what? Whether it works, whether it doesn't, potentially we won't be here to know, right? This is a multi-generation challenge that we're living through. So I love that. I thought, you know what? There's another nutcase that's clever enough to actually understand what's going on and that still has a sense of active hope, a sense of, and also, it's about me. It's not about, someone else or something else or, it's like, what about me? What am I doing? And I love that. I resonated with that. Another milestone of my life, meeting my co-founder, Fanny. And I thought, if there's at least two of us that think this is something, why not make, a bigger community and invite and inspire others to join us on that journey.
So this journey took you on creating People for Nature. Can you tell us more about People for Nature?
So People for Nature is really, the understanding or the realization that understanding the science behind the ecological overshoot is critical. We have to understand. We can't just move into solutions or anything without actually understanding what's happening. So it's, a journey of education. Also a journey of, no, we can't just leave it to the engineers or the scientists. We have to understand the problem with ourselves. Remember when I said to you, get a drawing and just ask the question until you understand. We're capable of understanding everything. Anything. And so I think it's, that realization, making sure that every Australian understands the ecological overshoot and the multifaceted crisis that we're facing. So biodiversity loss, climate change, all of the planetary boundaries. But then once you understand, great, again, you're on that path, journey A, journey B, two paths is like, do I just go, oh my God, we're all doomed, whatever, I'll just, hide in a little corner or get depressed or just think, oh, well, it doesn't matter because, I can't change the world. Or path B, People for Nature's path, where you go, no, I'm going to take action. I'm going to start transitioning. I'm going to inspire others. I'm going to rely on this ripple effect of maybe I can inspire 5, 6, 100 people around me to sort of start. And also the humility behind individual action, the fact that, you know what, like if everyone is just waiting to have the big magic wand and, change the world, nothing is going to happen. But if everyone starts taking individual action and starts to learn from that, I think something more meaningful can happen. And then, the third pillar of what we preach in a way is to make sure that we understand the impact that we're having. So if you're going to take an action, whatever that action is, making sure that with that action comes an understanding of the impact you're actually having. And that's linked also to the difficulty. So if you want to implement a change in your life to help the ecological transition, some changes are going to be easier than others, and some changes are going to have more impact than others. And so sometimes these two things, you have to do them, and you have to really research and to actually understand what is easy, what's not. That's by doing them, but also what's having an impact and what's not. And then, and this is where, Fanny will often say, oh, it's like a circular approach, because then it goes back into understanding what's happening. So it's what we do. And I think it resonates with a lot of people because it carries this sense of optimism and active hope. It's not like, oh, some other people are going to do it for me. It's like, I'm doing something. I'm, owning the science and understanding it in a way that I can explain it to others. And I'm also taking action at a level that feels like, it's tangible, it's at my scale, and we're not talking about decarbonizing the heavy industry, you're like, what, no, taking action in your backyard, taking action on your plate, taking action in your house, taking action around you, in something that's a bit more at your scale.
Because then it creates like a ripple effect across other people, and then they get to learn too. Can you tangibly talk about the process of a person joining a People for Nature action, whatever it may be? Can you take us through that kind of path? Because you talked about a circular model here of education, action, impact, taking
Yes.
us through that loop.
So to be sustainable, you have to, I often say, you have to try to find a way to make yourself redundant. Yeah. And so we have an ambassador pathway at People for Nature that's based on the trainer model, which, you know, is somewhat well known by some, maybe not enough by others, where, you know, you'll come to one of our events or workshops or some of the programs that we have. And if you like it, if you think, hey, this is a great tool, I'd like to be part of this, you know, then you can get trained, and you're trained on passing on that knowledge or showing how to take, you know, certain actions, etc. And it's that pathway that actually makes it sustainable and creates the ripple effect. Because say, for example, I run, you know, a workshop on climate change to 7 people and one of them decide to do it again, then you know, you can see how I'm multiplying very, very quickly the impact I can have, and also how I'm growing community. Someone said to me recently, you know, one of the hardest things to do is to create a community because, you know, it's not patented. There's no IP. It's something that's almost like alive. You know, it's something that you create that's alive. And I think that's really beautiful that we can create that at People for Nature, but that it has a life of its own. You know, it shapes itself in very organic ways that I think, you know, that can't, I mean, we have a lot of processes and a lot of resources, etc. But at the end of the day, it's the people that make the community. It's their connection, it's their enthusiasm, it's, you know, the way they inspire each other, their hope as well. And that's one of the things that makes me probably the happiest this year, is to see the amount of active hope I'm seeing within People for Nature. The number of people that, you know, did the training, but that are just having ideas, running workshops, you know, doing all sorts of different, you know, things, and also coming up with new ideas that I couldn't even think of. I think that's beautiful. I think that's really, you know, it's again, you know, this circularity of it. It's like you create something, but then when that thing starts feeding back to you, that's very special.
One incredible project that you're working on right now is Citizen Cup. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so COP is the convention on the parties, of the parties. So it's the big climate convention. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't say climate because there are COPs for lots of different things. But the one that we commonly know, we know a lot, is the COP on climate. Last year it was in Brazil. This year it will be held in Turkey. And this year for Australia, it's pretty special because we will, as Australia, we will be sharing the negotiations. Now, negotiations mean global negotiations on climate change. Super important convention, super important meeting, right? Now, at COPs, there's always a little space for civil society to meet. And that's what we know as the green zone. So you've got the blue zone where all the fancy people in their suits are having, you know, fancy talks about what we should do, you know, as United Nations to tackle climate change. And then you have a green zone where you will find citizens, you know, NGOs, you know, artists, just members of the civil society that are interested in listening and taking part and exchanging, etc. Now, we need people as we can to be in the civil society of COP, right? Like for me, if you told me, what if, you know, half of Australians knew about COP and wanted to be at COP? I'd be the happiest person. I'd be like, this is awesome. But realistically speaking, can we actually fly half of the Australian population to Turkey to talk about climate change? I mean, you know, there's a bit of dissonance there for me. So, and I think I share that, you know, I share that sense of dissonance with a lot of people. A lot of people feel that way as well. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to expand this green zone without flying to Turkey. So we're creating spaces and events and lots of different things, along with many, many other organizations that are taking part. And the idea really is to have green zones of COP for COP31 everywhere in Australia. And the formats can be as, you know, as big as sort of a large festival with thousands of people, or you and I having a cup of tea and a piece of cake and inviting our neighbors or, you know, fellow parents or colleagues and recreating this sense of green zone.
So much of what you're actually asking people with People for Nature Citizen Cup is to pay more attention, to slow down and feel connected to something a little bit larger. And that's also the mission of Reconnect in a way. Do you think that hunger for reconnection is growing now? You've started to see like more hopeful optimism through people around you, but I think I see it also on social media. So yeah, do you think that we're going back to that like more analog lifestyle reconnection? Or are we just noticing more of what is available around us?
No, I think it's changing. It's changing. Vala, I'm currently doing a permaculture design course. I'm amazed by how many people are doing the course. I'm amazed by the number of people I meet that have completed the course over the last, 30 years. Yeah, I think it's, the transition is well underway, because it has to. And I think we as, Homo sapiens, we know deep inside, we know that, the life as we have had it for, 150 years, it's just not, it's not working. It's not making us happy. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for life in general. And so, I think there's different steps of the journey. There are people that are in clear denial. There's people that, are convincing themselves that everything is going to be okay. There's different levels of understanding and awareness of the crisis. But I think, there's a lot of people like, it's a journey, right? Like you can be in denial only for so long. You can be in, oh, no, something is going to happen and everything is going to be okay for so long. And then eventually you and I think it's so important to share the stories of those that are a bit more advanced on their journey and where they are and how happy they are, because it's so inspiring for people that might be in that first step of, oh my God, like really? Like, because, it's crazy, the crisis we're facing. It's a very challenging time to be alive as humans. And so we need to hear beautiful narratives, hopeful narratives that are not the status quo. Because the status quo, no, it's not happening. And I think, as I said, it's work that will have to be done over multi-generation, of many generations. So it's not something that I'm going to, see or claim to see over the next few decades. But at least everything I'm seeing around me, tells me that, there's a longing for better futures, more hopeful futures than, the one that's, across all media platforms.
I see it too. I completely see it as well. Is there anything that you would like to share about People for Nature, Citizen Cup, anything that you're working on that you want to promote a bit more here?
I mean, we kind of do our own thing in our own little humble way. We're growing, we have grown, and I think you said that early in the podcast, we've grown a lot in the almost 2 years we've been alive. We've grown a lot. And I think with that came really a very meaningful question. And that's the question of growth. How much growth is sustainable? And so I'm navigating that growth kind of journey with a lot of questions, a lot of mindfulness as well. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful journey because, again, if you're really serious about the idea of walking your talk, then as you're growing, yeah, it's super exciting because it's an environmental charity. It's a beautiful community, amazing people wanting to do good things, but it's still growth. And so, is nature showing us that one thing, when it works, should expand, exponentially? Or should we build a lot of, little organizations, lots of communities, lots of, it's interesting questions to ask yourself when you're at that phase of the charity. So yeah, promoting, I say, if you're interested in what we do, of course, visit the website. Of course, join one of our workshops. I think you'll enjoy it. It's really nice to hear everyday people talking about these really, really complex things and getting a chance to actually talk about them as well yourself. So join and meet like-minded people, ask questions, challenge us as well. And if you're interested in what we do and you want to join the community, you're most welcome.
Fantastic. Okay, let's finish off with the signature question of the podcast, which is, what does the world you want to live in actually look like?
I think, over the last few years, and the climate has led me to understand biodiversity, what biodiversity actually means. And I am on the journey of understanding because it's very complex, biodiversity, very, very, very complex. But I think for me, the more diverse the world becomes, the more beautiful, the more resilient, and the more exciting. So yes to diversity in all of its forms everywhere, and trying to embrace that every single day, you know, what that actually means, diversity, not just biodiversity, but diversity of thoughts, diversity of everything, of people, of color, of smells, it just makes the world such a beautiful place and interesting.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Audrey, for sharing your incredible journey, for sharing your, as you like to call it, your stubborn optimism. So thank you again for being here, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.